On an April night in 2008, the Clearwater Sea was calm, but fate lurked behind every wave. Rachel Monroe, a 20-year-old marine biology student, left her shift at a small coffee shop with a radiant smile and her familiar canvas shoulder bag. She drove to Honeymoon Island, a place her friends described as a peaceful haven where Rachel would go to breathe with the ocean. The next morning, her seat in class remained empty, her phone silent and her dorm room cold with no sign of her return. What happened in the darkness that night would carve a wound in Clearwater that would never heal, leaving the community haunted by an unanswered question for 15 years. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated with the latest stories. On the evening of April 12, 2008, Rachel Monroe, a 20-year-old marine biology student at the University of South Florida, left her part-time shift at a small roadside coffee shop in Clearwater, the tranquil coastal city in Florida. She was a familiar face to regular customers, a young woman who was always smiling, approachable, and full of an energy that made her unforgettable. That night, Rachel wore a light blue shirt, simple jeans, and carried her worn canvas bag slung across her shoulder, the one she used to carry books and sometimes a few seashells collected from her beach walks. As she left the shop, Rachel waved goodbye to her coworkers and the last few customers with a radiant smile. A smile that those who saw it would never forget, as it became the final image of her etched in their memories. Rachel drove her silver sedan toward Honeymoon Island, a quiet beach she often visited when seeking solace, where she would sit listening to the waves and think about her sea turtle research projects she dreamed of pursuing. The only daughter of the Monroe family, Rachel was not only her parents' pride, but also a light in the eyes of her friends, a young woman full of ambition, a lover of nature who spoke passionately about her dream of protecting the ocean. That night, Clearwater was as it always was. Streetlights cast a dim yellow glow on quiet streets. The scent of sea salt drifted through the air, and no one could have imagined that in that ordinary moment a tragedy was unfolding. The next morning, when her biology professor called roll, Rachel's seat was empty. Friends initially thought she might have overslept or fallen ill, but by noon, when she remained unreachable by phone, worry began to spread. Her roommate reported that Rachel hadn't returned to the dorm all night, an unusual occurrence as Rachel was punctual and never missed class without notice. The Monroe family immediately contacted her friends, professors, and places she frequented, hoping she was simply somewhere else, but their efforts were in vain. As dusk fell over Clearwater, Rachel's parents sat in their small home overlooking Tampa Bay, their hearts heavy with dread. A growing sense of fear consumed every fleeting moment of hope. In desperation, they called the Clearwater Police Department to report their daughter missing. That call marked the beginning of a nightmare that neither the Monroe family nor this coastal community could have ever imagined. When the phone rang at the Clearwater Police Department on the evening of April 13, 2008, Daniel Monroe's trembling voice was recorded in the report. "My daughter hasn't come home since last night. Please help us." The report was quickly relayed to night patrol units, and within hours, an official search began. Officers retraced Rachel's usual route from the coffee shop where she worked to the road leading to Honeymoon Island. As the night deepened, cold sea salt breezes stung the faces of the search team. But in the tense atmosphere, everyone understood that every passing second was critical. Less than an hour later, flashlights scanning the beach parking lot froze on an unsettling sight. Rachel's silver sedan sat silently in a corner, its door slightly ajar, keys still in the ignition. There were no signs of preparation for a trip, no suitcase or belongings. Her canvas bag lay neatly on the passenger seat, containing only a few books and a notebook. Everything suggested she had stepped out in a hurry and vanished without a trace. As investigators shone their lights on the sand near the parking lot, they noticed chaotic footprints deeply imprinted, overlapping in no clear direction. One officer bent down and picked up a dark blue piece of fabric caked with mud. Under closer inspection, they realized it was a torn pair of jeans with a small dried bloodstain on the hem. The scene suddenly grew heavy. This was no longer a simple missing person case, but bore the signs of a crime. News spread quickly, and within hours, the beach was cordoned off with yellow caution tape. Police cars lined up, their red and blue lights flashing against the palm trees while the waves continued to crash indifferently. Clearwater residents began to gather, anxious whispers spreading. "Is it really Rachel? It can't be. She was smiling at me in the coffee shop yesterday." Fear and confusion rippled through the community as Rachel wasn't just a stranger. She was a familiar face. Rachel's parents arrived soon after. Linda Monroe collapsed at the side of her daughter's car, her trembling hands touching the hood still dusted with sea salt. Daniel had to be supported by an officer, his eyes vacant as he stared at the sand, where a flurry of footprints suggested his daughter's final struggle. Hot tears mingled with the salty sea breeze, leaving a wound in their hearts that even without answers, they knew signaled Rachel had met with harm. That night, police deployed K-9 units to search the beach. The dogs followed a trail toward the water's edge, stopping where the tide met the shore. High waves had erased most traces, making further tracking impossible. Divers were sent into the shallow waters, searching through murky currents, but found only drifting debris and clumps of seaweed. Despair settled over the search team. As midnight struck, the search was paused due to limited visibility and rising tides. The Monroe family was escorted home, exhausted and broken. Linda sat motionless on a chair, her eyes vacant, while Daniel paced aimlessly. In their small living room, a photo of Rachel smiling with her dog became a knife to their hearts. On the morning of April 14th, local news broadcast an urgent alert. University of South Florida student missing, car abandoned at Honeymoon Island. Fear enveloped Clearwater. Parents warned their children to avoid going out at night, and students whispered anxiously on campus. Rachel's friends couldn't believe the girl who studied with them just days ago had vanished. Questions swirled. Where did Rachel go? What happened on that dark beach? Who left those chaotic footprints and the blood-stained jeans? No one had answers, only a chilling truth. Clearwater was no longer the safe haven they once believed it to be. In the first 2 days after Rachel's car and the unsettling evidence were found at Honeymoon Island, the Clearwater police worked tirelessly. They interviewed dozens of Rachel's close contacts, classmates, co-workers, neighbors. But the name that surfaced most in the investigation was Ethan Clark, Rachel's ex-boyfriend. Ethan, 22, was a business administration student at the same university. The two had dated for over a year, considered a perfect couple by many. But their relationship ended in January 2008, 3 months before Rachel's disappearance. The reason for the breakup was unclear. Some friends said Rachel wanted to focus on her studies and marine lab work, while Ethan leaned into partying and socializing. Others claimed tensions arose late in the previous year with frequent arguments over jealousy. As police sought potential suspects, Ethan became the prime focus. Within 48 hours of the missing person report, investigators knocked on the door of the apartment where Ethan lived with his stepfather on the outskirts of Clearwater. Detectives noted that Ethan was cooperative but visibly nervous. He denied any involvement in Rachel's disappearance, insisting their relationship was over. When asked about the night of April 12th, Ethan said he was at home, but only his stepfather could confirm his alibi. This raised suspicions as it meant he had an unverified window of time. In the following days, witnesses came forward. A classmate named Allison reported seeing Rachel and Ethan argue heatedly at a bar near campus a week before Rachel vanished. According to Allison, the fight centered on Ethan's refusal to let go of the relationship while Rachel insisted on distance. Allison vividly recalled Ethan's angry expression as he left, making his alibi seem less credible. News of Ethan's investigation leaked, sparking a firestorm among students. Friends of Rachel were divided. Some believed Ethan could have acted rashly in anger, while others thought he was incapable of such harm. The Monroe family was torn. Linda had once seen Ethan as a son, but after hearing about the argument, she began to fear he was responsible for their daughter's tragedy. Police pressed Ethan further, citing indirect evidence, placing him near Clearwater that night. But Ethan stuck to his story. He was home with his stepfather watching a basketball game. His stepfather corroborated this, claiming Ethan never left the house. To verify or refute this, police collected Ethan's DNA and compared it to samples from the torn jeans at the scene. This was a pivotal moment, as DNA testing in 2008, while not as advanced as today, could still identify direct links. The results stunned many. Ethan's DNA did not match any evidence at the scene. This shifted the investigation and public opinion. Some criticized the police for hastily labeling Ethan the prime suspect, arguing it ruined his life. Though temporarily cleared, Ethan remained tied to the case, facing pressure from peers, professors, and strangers, forcing him to pause his studies and leave Clearwater. For the Monroes, Ethan's exclusion brought no relief, only deeper confusion. If not Ethan, who could have harmed Rachel? The question hung in the air unanswered, deepening their nightmare. In a local TV interview, Linda Monroe tearfully said, "I don't know what happened. I just want my daughter back." Her words silenced Clearwater, underscoring that Rachel's disappearance was no longer just the Monroe family's pain. It was a wound shared by the entire town. Though Ethan was no longer the main suspect, suspicion lingered. To many, he remained the angry ex-boyfriend who fought with Rachel days before she vanished. In the shadowy gaps of the investigation, no one knew the obsession would haunt Ethan for years like an indelible shadow. When DNA results cleared, Ethan Clark is the primary suspect. The Clearwater police informed the Monroe family that the investigation would explore other leads. But this brought no comfort to Rachel's parents. They didn't care whether Ethan was guilty. They only knew their daughter was gone without a trace, and each passing day made the hope of finding her alive feel more fragile. Linda Monroe spiraled into despair, barely able to leave her bed, while Daniel tried to stay strong for his wife, though he too was breaking inside. A week after Rachel's disappearance, friends, professors, and Clearwater residents held a prayer vigil on Honeymoon Island, where her car and initial evidence were found. Hundreds of candles formed a circle on the sand, their flickering light reflecting on tear-streaked faces. Rachel's friends and fellow marine biology students stood in a line, holding each other tightly, many sobbing uncontrollably. One of her professors spoke, voice choked. Rachel was an exceptional student, a kind soul who dreamed of researching to protect the ocean. She didn't deserve to vanish like this. The Monroe family sat silently in the candle-lit circle, Linda clutching a photo of Rachel to her chest, her hands trembling as if holding on to her daughter's last presents. Daniel, a stoic man, couldn't stop tears from streaming down his face as he stared into the dark sea. The relentless waves seemed to echo the crowd sobs, making the vigil a moment of unprecedented grief in Clearwater's memory. Local media swarmed the event. Reporters crowded the beach, cameras flashing relentlessly. The largest Tampa Bay newspaper ran the headline, "Clearwater mourns Rachel Monroe." TV stations broadcast live, showing the Monroes sitting on the sand, surrounded by candles and comforting embraces. The coverage shocked Florida, piling pressure on the police to provide answers and prove justice still existed. But as the community grieved, other voices emerged. Rumors, speculations, and accusations. Despite DNA evidence clearing him, Ethan Clark's name kept resurfacing. Tabloids ran headlines like, "Is the ex-boyfriend truly innocent?" Or "Can the stepfather's alibi be trusted?" In town forums and bars, debates raged. Some insisted Ethan was involved, while others argued the police were overlooking a more dangerous stranger. Tensions divided Clearwater. A group of students held a small protest outside the university, carrying signs demanding justice for Rachel. Some openly named Ethan, claiming he slipped through a loophole. Others who knew him defended him, arguing he was scapegoat for the community's anger. The atmosphere grew heavy, with conflict seeping into everyday conversations. Amid the disputes, the Monroes sank deeper into sorrow. Their small home overflowed with flowers, prayer cards, and food from neighbors. But these only highlighted the unbearable void. Rachel's empty bed, her open book on the desk, her sneakers neatly by the door as if she'd walk in any moment. Linda spent hours in Rachel's room holding her daughter's last worn sweater, its familiar scent choking her with grief. Police held press conferences insisting they were exploring all possibilities and ruling no one out. But the public wasn't easily appeased. Every new article, crime scene photo, or rumor fueled the case's grip on Clearwater, transforming Rachel's loss from a personal tragedy into a collective obsession. The once peaceful tourist town known for its beaches was now shrouded in fear and mistrust. In a TV interview, a neighbor said, "I don't let my daughter walk alone at night anymore. If this could happen to Rachel, it could happen to anyone." Her words captured a bitter truth. The community didn't just mourn Rachel. They felt robbed of the safety they once trusted. As the candles on Honeymoon Island faded, one truth loomed larger than ever. The Monroes' pain was no longer theirs alone. It had become a crack in the heart of the town, a wound that time and prayers couldn't yet heal. After the beachside vigil and a flurry of press conferences, many in Clearwater believed the police would soon find the person behind Rachel Monroe's disappearance. But those initial days of fervor gave way to a harsh reality. No new evidence emerged. Police interviewed dozens of witnesses and reviewed every camera around the beach and coffee shop, but all leads ended in dead ends. DNA from the torn jeans and bloodstain was sent to CODIS, the national database. But in 2008, technology wasn't advanced enough to yield a match. The summer passed in exhaustion and despair. News coverage continued, but its frequency dwindled, moving from front pages to small corners of local news sections. The faces that once held candles on the beach gradually returned to their daily lives. Only the Monroe family remained trapped in a vortex of pain, never finding relief. Daniel called the police station regularly, asking for updates, but each time received the same response. "We're still investigating, but there's nothing new." Every time he hung up, he felt another piece of hope slip away. By October 2008, after over 6 months of fruitless searching, the Clearwater police had to admit they had no viable leads. Rachel Monroe's case was officially classified as a cold case. Those words appeared in the investigation file like an invisible sentence for the Monroe family. Justice was frozen and their daughter might never return. When this news spread, Clearwater was shaken once more, but this time in heavy silence. Gone were the sensational headlines and crowds gathering at the beach. Only a few short articles mentioned that the case had reached a dead end, urging anyone with information to contact the police. But those words faded in the minds of many, much like the prayer candles had long since burned out. The Monroe family, however, refused to accept the silence. Despite her declining health, Linda joined support groups for families of missing person. She wrote dozens of letters to the Florida governor and the FBI, hoping a higher authority would take notice. Daniel tirelessly printed flyers, posting them in shops, post offices, and schools, featuring Rachel's smiling face from her high school graduation. "Remember this face," he told anyone who took a flyer. "It can't be allowed to disappear." Their efforts touched many, but some began to turn away. Neighbors sighed, whispering that the Monroes were torturing themselves and should learn to accept reality. But how could they accept it when Rachel's room remained untouched? Her bed still bearing the imprint of her pillow, and every photo on the wall reminded them that a part of their flesh and blood was gone without answers. In the years that followed, Rachel Monroe's case was only mentioned on the anniversary of her disappearance. Old friends gathered with the family to light candles, pray, and then disperse into the night. The broader public had moved on, caught up in new events and hotter news. To the town, Rachel's case had become an old scar, painful but no longer bleeding. For Daniel and Linda, the wound never healed. The loss of their daughter grayed their hair and slowed their steps. At every meal, Rachel's empty chair haunted them, and in fitful sleep, Linda dreamed of her daughter walking through the door, waving and smiling as she had that fateful night. Cold case, those two chilling words not only froze the investigation file, but also a part of the Monroe's soul. For them, time stopped on April 12, 2008, and for years to come, Clearwater would live with a haunting truth. The person who took Rachel Monroe was out there invisible within the community, while justice remained silent. From 2009 onward, Rachel Monroe's case was officially a cold case, and silence settled over Clearwater like a thick fog. Each year on April 12th, the Monroes held a small memorial at Honeymoon Island. Candles were lit, sea winds blew fiercely, and Rachel's face in the photo glowed brightly in the light. But over time, attendance dwindled from hundreds to dozens. Then just a small group of loyal friends and former professors. For Rachel's parents, this didn't diminish the memorial's meaning, but it underscored their growing isolation in their quest for justice. Daniel and Linda visibly aged. By 2010, Daniel's hair was nearly all gray and Linda's once steady steps grew sluggish. The lingering pain of years took its toll, aging them twice as fast. Linda was hospitalized multiple times for heart issues, which doctors attributed to prolonged stress and depression. Yet each time she returned home, she sat in Rachel's room for hours, her eyes fixed on her daughter's belongings. Daniel, though tougher, sat quietly on the porch each night staring at Tampa Bay, where he believed his daughter was lost. To him, time halted in 2008, and everything since was a repetitive cycle without Rachel's smile. In Clearwater, Rachel Monroe's case became an unhealed wound. Residents spoke of it as a cautionary tale, a haunting shadow. Parents told their children Rachel's story to warn them against going out alone at night. New students at the University of South Florida heard of the girl who vanished at Honeymoon Island as a sad town legend. Though no longer on front pages, the case lingered in the collective subconscious, a crack in Clearwater's peaceful facade. Each year, local media ran a brief article on the anniversary, repeating, Police continued to seek information. The Monroes never give up hope. After dozens of such reports, they became formulaic with little expectation of breakthroughs. Some grew tired of the topic, believing further efforts were futile. But for the Monroes, each small article was a lifeline they clung to. In 2015, Clearwater celebrated its centennial. Amid festive events, the Monroes quietly set up a memorial table for Rachel in a corner of the main square with her photo and white flowers. Passers-by paused briefly before rejoining the cheerful crowd. The contrast stung Daniel. "This town has forgotten her," he sighed to Linda, but she shook her head. "No, they haven't forgotten. They just don't know what else to do." Time marched on and Rachel's case reached its 10th, then 15th year. Clearwater changed. New resorts sprang up. Tourists flocked. But Rachel's memory lingered in whispered stories. To many, she became a symbol of safety's fragility, a reminder that even in a peaceful tourist town, darkness could strike. For the Monroes, the memory never faded. Daniel kept contacting the police, knowing the case was nearly frozen. Linda attended meetings with families of the missing, becoming a familiar face at small conferences. Their private pain somehow merged with others' grief, forming a bonded community of loss. From 2009 to 2022, Rachel Monroe's case was a recurring sad song. Remembrance, hope, disappointment, silence, sheet. Her parents never gave up. "We won't stop searching," Daniel said in a 2020 interview, his eyes resolute despite his frail frame. "Because Rachel deserves the truth. My daughter deserves justice." Their persistence in a town that had grown accustomed to living with the shadow of an unsolved case kept Rachel's memory alive. Clearwater, in one way or another, still owed the Monroes a truth and answer. And for 14 long silent years, that haunting waited for a chance to reignite. In early 2023, as Clearwater prepared for spring, a sudden spark pierced the darkness that had shrouded the Monroes for nearly 15 years. Florida joined a genealogy program, a new investigative method successfully used in other states to trace criminals through relatives' DNA and public databases. To most, it was just another legal news item. But for the Monroes, hearing that Clearwater police would resubmit Rachel's uncracked DNA samples, their hearts stirred for the first time in years. In March 2023, state lab experts re-examined the biological sample from the torn jeans found near Honeymoon Island. In 2008, technology could only extract basic DNA segments, insufficient for a coatism match. Now advanced sequencing allowed analysts to reconstruct a near-complete genetic profile. The week-so-long process was like dusting off puzzle pieces, piecing them together to reveal a clearer picture. When the complete DNA profile was entered into the system, a stunning result emerged: a partial match with a distant relative in a public genealogy database. From this faint link, forensic genealogists began reconstructing a family tree, tracing branches through marriages and migrations in and out of Clearwater over decades. The meticulous work, like assembling a vast puzzle, centered on a name: Mark Doyle. Mark Doyle, 52, had lived 2 blocks from the Monroes in 2008. At the time of Rachel's disappearance, he was 37, a freelance air conditioner repairman hired by many in the neighborhood. A quiet man living alone after a failed marriage, he had few close friends. During the initial 2008 investigation, his name didn't stand out. He wasn't among Rachel's acquaintances and had no serious criminal record, only minor infractions like speeding and disorderly conduct. Like hundreds of others, he was dismissed as a suspect. Now, with DNA evidence, Mark Doyle emerged as a critical link. Investigators quietly began surveillance. They monitored his current residence, a small rented house in North Clearwater, where he worked sporadically, sometimes taking repair jobs, sometimes vanishing for days. They noted his habits, daily routes, and waited for a chance to collect a comparison DNA sample. The opportunity came when Mark discarded a half-runk soda can in a public trash bin. Investigators retrieved it and sent it to the lab. Within a week, the result confirmed the DNA on the can matched the sample from Rachel's jeans. After 15 years, the police had found the man hidden in the shadows. When this news reached the Monroes, Linda broke down, crying with both relief and renewed pain. "I waited so long to hear a name," she said, choking back tears in an interview. Daniel nodded silently, his trembling hands clasped as if finally able to name the person who took Rachel. Clearwater was rocked again. Mark Doyle's name echoed in conversations, and people were stunned to realize the suspect had lived just minutes from the Monroes. Former neighbors recalled a quiet man who avoided interaction, often walking to the beach alone at night. Some admitted feeling uneasy around him, but never imagined he could be tied to such a horrific crime. On July 14, 2023, Clearwater police arrested Mark Doyle at his home. He was handcuffed in front of neighbors, his face emotionless. The initial charges, first-degree murder and kidnapping of Rachel Monroe. When footage of the arrest aired, many in the community exhaled as if an invisible weight had lifted. Yet alongside relief grew outrage. Why did it take 15 years for Mark Doyle's name to surface? Many criticized the police for overlooking him early on, arguing that earlier use of advanced technology could have brought justice sooner, sparing the Monroes years of torment. 4 of them in rows. The revelation was bittersweet. Linda said, "I thought I'd die without knowing what happened to Rachel. Now I know, but this truth tears my heart again. He lived so close to us. Rachel must have passed him so many times, unaware she was facing a monster." Daniel chose silence. At a press conference, he said only, "We believe justice will continue its course." His eyes no longer held the despair of before, but carried a heavy weight, as if he knew the journey wasn't over. The long silence was broken, and from a tiny DNA fragment a new door opened in Rachel Monroe's case. Clearwater buzzed with talk, anger, and anticipation for final answers. As Mark Doyle was led to a cell, the community knew they were witnessing the next chapter of a tragedy that had never closed. The news of Mark Doyle's arrest by Clearwater police in July 2023 spread like wildfire. Within hours, images of the 52-year-old being handcuffed and led from his small rented house in the suburbs flooded local TV and social media. Clearwater residents sat stunned, realizing the man accused of Rachel Monroe's murder wasn't a distant stranger, but the friendly neighbor they once knew. Memories of Mark flooded back. He'd worked as an air conditioner repairman, often visiting homes for emergency fixes, always soft-spoken, reserved, but polite. Some neighbors recalled him helping with small tasks, carrying groceries, changing light bulbs, even sharing oranges from his yard. "I can't believe it. He was the last person I'd suspect," a woman from his 2008 neighborhood said on a news broadcast. The community was further shaken when reports revealed Mark had joined the volunteer search in the early days of Rachel's disappearance. Witnesses confirmed seeing him during flyer distributions, even patrolling Honeymoon Island's shore. The idea that the killer stood among those praying for the victim, feigning empathy, sent chills through everyone. It's a sickening betrayal. A retired officer from the case said he was there watching us search, hearing our prayers, knowing exactly where Rachel was. For the Monroes, the shock was like a knife twisting in an unhealed wound. Linda collapsed upon learning Mark had been among them during those dark days in 2008. The image of the quiet man nodding in condolence, handing her a water bottle at a vigil, now felt like cruel mockery. "I thanked him. I said, 'God bless you,'" she sobbed in an interview. "All along he was the monster who killed my daughter." Daniel was equally stunned. He recalled Mark visiting their home to fix a broken air conditioner weeks before Rachel vanished. The firm handshake, the faint smile, now blood-stained memories. "I let him into our house past Rachel's room," he said, voice trembling. "If I'd known," the sentence trailed off, but everyone understood. If he'd known, he'd have done anything to protect his daughter. Clearwater's emotions split into layers. Some felt deeply betrayed, having seen Mark as part of the town. Others were horrified by his ability to hide, a killer living among them, blending into daily life, undetected for 15 years. Fear spread with whispers that you never really know your neighbors. The media quickly seized the story with dramatic flair. A bold headline appeared in the Tampa Bay Times. "Search volunteer turns out to be killer. Clearwater in shock." TV stations replayed 2008 footage showing Mark blending into the crowd, his face impassive among those holding candles for Rachel. The sight sent chills across Florida. Ethan Clark, the ex-boyfriend once suspected, gave a rare interview. Now in his 30s, he said, "I've lived 15 years under this case's shadow with many thinking I was guilty. Now the truth is out, and it's more horrific than anyone imagined." His voice wavered when mentioning Rachel, his eyes reflecting a mix of relief and bitterness. In the days following Mark's arrest, Clearwater was engulfed in turmoil. Residents gathered outside the police station, holding signs demanding justice. Many wept, recalling memories of Rachel and years of fear and mutual suspicion. An atmosphere of anger, pain, and relief enveloped the town. For the Monroe family, outrage overshadowed all else. At a press conference, Linda said, "I didn't just lose my daughter. I was deceived by the man who stood with us, heard our prayers. He looked me in the eye without blinking. It's not just a crime. It's cruelty beyond imagination." The community understood this shock wouldn't fade easily. Clearwater would forever be marked by the realization that for years they walked beside a killer unknowingly. As Mark Doyle sat in his cell awaiting trial, that horror rippled through every street and home. The town was no longer the same. After the shock of Mark Doyle's arrest, Clearwater police entered the critical phase, interrogation. In a cold room under fluorescent lights, the 52-year-old's wrinkled face was illuminated as he initially sat silent, arms crossed, eyes down, breathing heavily as if building a wall between himself and the world. But after hours of persistent questioning, his silence crumbled. Mark recounted that April 2008 night in a flat, emotionless tone, as if describing an old habit. He said he drove by Honeymoon Island. After drinking a few beers in his garage, seeing Rachel step out of her car with her canvas bag, he stopped, initially intending to strike up a chat for fun. He recalled calling out, asking if she wanted to walk with him. Rachel paused for a moment, shook her head, and quickened her pace toward the sand. In his confession, Mark admitted that her rejection ignited a surge of rage. He described running to her, grabbing her arm, trying to pull her back. She resisted, screamed, and in a blind fury, he punched her face. Rachel fell to the sand, crying and shouting. Mark said he feared her cries would draw attention, so he lunged and strangled her with both hands. "I didn't mean to kill her right then," he said coldly. "But when she stopped breathing, I knew it had gone too far." The interrogation room fell silent as those words echoed. Investigators pressed further, and Mark detailed the gruesome aftermath. After Rachel went limp, he dragged her body to nearby bushes. During the struggle, her jeans tore, stained with mud and blood from her nose. Panicked that the clothing could be evidence, he tossed the jeans into a muddy area near the beach. The chaotic footprints in the sand, shoe marks, drag trails were the result of that brief but brutal struggle. Mark confessed to leaving Rachel's car in the lot, keys in the ignition as if she just stepped out. He then drove home, pretending nothing happened. "I thought no one would know," he admitted, "and I was right for a very long time." The chilling part was how every detail matched the 2008 crime scene. The torn, muddy, blood-stained jeans, the chaotic footprints, the car with keys left in it, all aligned perfectly, as if he were reading the police report. This not only confirmed his confession, but shattered the faint hope that Rachel's death was less painful. In reality, she was killed for a single shake of her head. The Monroes were informed after the interrogation. Hearing Mark's confession, Linda collapsed. She just said no. One word and it cost her life. She sobbed. Daniel Quieter clenched his fists, his face pale with suppressed rage. They'd waited 15 years for an answer, but this one was crueler than anything they'd imagined. In Clearwater, Mark's confession was as shocking as his arrest. Residents shuddered, realizing Rachel's death wasn't a complex plot or calculated scheme, but the irrational outburst of a grown man unable to handle rejection. The scariest part is it could happen to anyone, a university student said on TV. A normal moment, a harmless refusal, and a life is gone. Media outlets dissected Mark's motives, labeling it a crime of arrogance and anger. Psychologists on air explained that some individuals harbor latent instability that can erupt violently from minor triggers. But such explanations didn't ease the pain. Clearwater faced the stark truth. Rachel Monroe died at the hands of a neighbor they trusted on a peaceful night, simply because she dared to say no. In the following days, police released more evidence corroborating the confession. Mud from the jeans matched samples from the marsh near Honeymoon Island. Footprints matched Mark's shoe size from the time, and crucially, his DNA was on the jeans. It formed a complete picture, leaving no room for doubt. As this news spread, fear and anger created a heavy atmosphere in Clearwater. Memorials for Rachel resumed with denser candlelight, but also faces flushed with fury. People chanted for justice while the Monroes sat in the front, their faces etched with pain, both resolved and deepened. Mark Doyle, while detained, showed no remorse. When an investigator asked if he had a message for the Monroes, he shrugged. "I don't know what to say. It happened a long time ago." This attitude fueled public outrage, revealing a chilling indifference in the killer's soul beyond words. After 15 long years, Clearwater finally knew the truth about Rachel Monroe's death. But it brought no peace, only a haunting question. Why did a headshake cost a life? And why did the community wait so long to learn that justice could have come sooner, unhindered by time and technology's limits? Mark Doyle's cold confession not only ended 15 years of mystery, but ignited an unprecedented wave of outrage in Clearwater. If residents were initially stunned that the killer was a friendly neighbor, their anger now turned to the 2008 police who overlooked Mark, leaving the Monroes in agony for over a decade and a half. Many openly criticized why wasn't a grown man living 2 blocks from the victim, with odd behavior investigated more thoroughly. Why weren't DNA traces limited by 2008 technology preserved for earlier retesting? A former teacher of Rachel cried out, "If they'd been more persistent, dug deeper into seemingly ordinary names, Rachel might have had justice long ago." Florida media seized on this outrage. Major outlets like the Miami Herald, Orlando Sentinel, and national TV networks covered the story extensively, analyzing every angle, interviewing forensic experts, former investigators, and the Monroes. Sensational headlines appeared. Justice delayed 15 years. Clearwater Police's mistake. From friendly neighbor to killer. Public pressure forced the Clearwater Police Department to hold a press conference. Before dozens of microphones and cameras, the current chief admitted, "We did our best with 2008's resources and technology, but clearly there were shortcomings. We share the pain of the Monroes and the community." Despite the sincerity, it didn't quell the anger. Many felt the earlier lack of diligence let Mark Doyle live freely for 15 years while Rachel was lost at 20. Meanwhile, media uncovered chilling details. Mark had joined the search for Rachel, stood beside her parents at vigils. The thought deepened the community's sense of betrayal and abandonment by the justice system. "He didn't just kill Rachel, he deceived us all and the police let him slip through," a Clearwater resident said angrily. Small protests erupted outside the police station. People carried Rachel's photos, white candles, and signs reading, "Justice for Rachel, never again." Students from the University of South Florida, where Rachel studied, held a public discussion calling for reforms in homicide investigations. Academics and legal activists joined, citing Rachel's case as a prime example for integrating modern DNA technology into unsolved cases. Experts called it a wake-up call for local investigations. A Tampa Bay Times editorial wrote, "Rachel Monroe's story is painful proof that justice needs not just persistence, but innovation. Without it, we risk losing more Rachel." Widely shared, it voiced the community's anger and desire for change. Amid the media storm, the Monroes spoke out. Daniel said, "We know no one can bring Rachel back. But if her death can change a system, spare other families our suffering, then this pain has meaning." Linda, despite frail health, appeared publicly, eyes red but voice firm. "We want this system to face its mistakes so no family waits 15 years in darkness again." In live broadcasts, the image of the aging but resilient couple touched millions. They were no longer just Rachel's parents, but symbols of families seeking belated justice across America. Meanwhile, Mark Doyle's trial awaited. But even before it began, Clearwater became Florida's focal point. The small coastal town known for tourism and sunshine was now tied to a story of tragedy and outrage. Residents kept asking, if police had looked closer in 2008, would Rachel have rested sooner? Would the town have escaped 15 years of fear and doubt? The anger, reactions, and guilt would continue to erupt as Mark Doyle faced the courtroom. Clearwater and Florida watched not just for a trial, but for answers to a burning question. Does the justice system truly deserve the trust of those it's meant to protect? In spring 2024, nearly 16 years after that fateful night at Honeymoon Island, Rachel Monroe's name echoed again in the Penleys County Courthouse. The seats were packed, reporters crowded in. Clearwater residents arrived at dawn, and in the front row, Daniel and Linda Monroe sat hand in hand, their faces etched with wrinkles of age and unyielding pain. They'd waited nearly 2 decades for this moment. The prosecutor opened the trial with a thick file. 2023 genetic genealogy DNA results. DNA from Mark's discarded soda can. 2008 crime scene photos of the torn, muddy, blood-stained jeans. They displayed old images, chaotic footprints in the sand, Rachel's car with keys in the ignition, and then played Mark's chilling confession recording. The courtroom fell silent as his dull voice rang out. "I just wanted to talk," she said. "No, I lost control and then I strangled her." The prosecution didn't stop there. They called a witness who saw Mark in the 2008 volunteer search group. A woman recounted, "I clearly remember him holding a flashlight walking near Rachel's parents. I'll never forget that look now, it feels so cold." Her testimony made Linda sob, her head dropping onto her husband's shoulder. Mark's defense team was weak from the start. His lawyer argued the confession might have been psychologically coerced and that without a body, the cause of death couldn't be absolutely confirmed. But the prosecution swiftly countered, highlighting how Mark's confession matched crime scene details never publicized. No one but the perpetrator could know the jeans were thrown in the mud, or that the keys were left in the ignition, the prosecutor emphasized. Throughout the trial, Mark Doyle sat motionless, his face cold, rarely making eye contact. He showed no remorse, no reaction as witnesses, and the Monroe spoke of 16 years of pain. When asked by the judge if he wished to speak, Mark shook his head. His silence to the community was more terrifying than his confession. It revealed the stark indifference of a man who destroyed a young woman's life. On sentencing day, the courtroom was so full, many stood in the hallway. The air was heavy, almost suffocating. The judge read the verdict slowly but firmly. The court finds the defendant, Mark Doyle, guilty of first-degree murder, with overwhelming evidence from DNA, his confession, and witnesses. The defendant's actions were barbaric, senseless, and left an unhealable wound on the victim's family and Clearwater community. Pausing, the judge looked at Mark. Justice has come, though late, but it has come. Therefore, this court sentences the defendant, Mark Doyle, to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in sighs and stifled sobs. Daniel gripped Linda's hand, tears streaming down his weathered face. Linda wept silently, her shoulders trembling, but a rare glint of relief shone in her eyes. The light of release after years of waiting. Some Clearwater residents cried, embracing an emotion. It wasn't joy, but a bitter peace. Justice had finally spoken. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Headlines blared instantly. Mark Doyle sentenced to life in Rachel Monroe case. Justice delayed. Clearwater breathes. TV channels broadcast the Monroes leaving the court, embraced by the crowd sharing pain and relief. A University of South Florida student held a sign, "Rachel will never be forgotten." Mark Doyle's trial not only closed a 16-year case, but left a profound lesson for Florida's criminal justice system. In the sentencing, the judge stressed, "We must remember that delays in technology and determination delayed justice. This is a reminder no evidence should be forgotten. No family left in darkness. For the Monroes, the verdict didn't bring Rachel back. But in the courtroom silence after everyone left, Daniel whispered, "Rachel, justice has come. We kept our promise." After Mark Doyle's sentencing, Clearwater seemed to exhale. But the peace was never complete. The Monroe family's loss could not be undone, and Rachel's memory lingered like a slow-bleeding wound. Yet from the darkness of grief, a new light began to spread. The community resolved to turn Rachel's death into a legacy. In the fall of 2024, the University of South Florida announced the Rachel Monroe Scholarship for marine biology students, the field Rachel pursued before her future was stolen. The scholarship's launch took place in the university's main hall, attended by the Monroes, Rachel's old friends, and numerous students. As the plaque bearing the scholarship's name was unveiled, Linda wept, covering her face while Daniel bowed his head, his trembling hand touching the engraved letters of his daughter's name. "She dreamed of studying the ocean, and now that dream will live on in other students," he said, choking back tears. In the years that followed, the Rachel Monroe Scholarship supported dozens of young students, many pursuing marine conservation, just as Rachel had been passionate about. Each award season, her name echoed, reminding everyone that from loss, something better could emerge. Beyond education, Rachel Monroe's case left a lasting mark on Florida's criminal investigation field. It became a textbook example in forensic and law enforcement seminars, showcasing the power of genetic genealogy, the method that changed the game. From a seemingly useless DNA sample, modern technology unmasked the killer, closing a case thought unsolvable. Police agencies across Florida began reviewing hundreds of unsolved murder cases, hoping to replicate the success. A 2025 Florida Department of Justice report stated, "The Rachel Monroe case proves the necessity of preserving and reanalyzing all biological evidence. No DNA sample should be deemed useless and no case truly closed." This led to the reopening of numerous cold cases, some finding suspects through the same technique. In Clearwater, Rachel's image became a symbol of perseverance. At the town square, a small memorial wall was erected inscribed, "Justice may come late, but it never fades." Residents brought flowers and candles there on the anniversary of Rachel's disappearance. The place, once steeped in fear and anger, became a site for reaffirming faith that darkness must eventually yield to light. The Monroes, despite their enduring emptiness, learned to move forward. In a late 2024 interview, Daniel said, "We lost our daughter and nothing can change that, but at least we no longer live in uncertainty. The truth is out and Rachel can rest." Linda, holding his hand, added softly, "She left a legacy and will live to keep that flame alive." Still, the resolution of Rachel's case didn't bring full closure. At the 16th memorial, whispers circulated that Florida had hundreds of other cold cases, each with a family waiting for justice. "We found the truth for Rachel," an old friend said. But how many other Rachel are still in the dark? Those words rang like an unfinished melody, a reminder that Rachel Monroe's case was not just a singular story, but a collective call. In the light of new technology, the community hoped other cases would be solved, sparing families endless torment. And so, Clearwater, once haunted by pain, embraced a new responsibility to keep Rachel's memory alive while relentlessly pushing for justice for those yet unnamed. The story of the 20-year-old girl whose future was stolen over a shake of her head transcended personal tragedy. It became a beacon for hundreds of cold cases across Florida. In the quiet nights by Honeymoon Island, where the wind still blows and waves crash as they did years ago, candles are lit every April. That echo, that legacy endures, a reminder that justice may come late, but will arrive as long as there are those who refuse to give up. Rachel Monroe's story is not just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of a broader reality in America today. Justice sometimes comes late, but we must never stop seeking it. Her case shows how technological advancements can unlock the truth. In 2008, the DNA on Rachel's torn jeans wasn't enough to find a suspect in the CODIS database. But by 2023, when Florida adopted genetic genealogy, that DNA exposed Mark Doyle, the killer who joined the victim's search and was seen as a friendly neighbor. The lesson is clear. Evidence deemed useless today can become vital tomorrow, if preserved and re-examined properly. This reminds law enforcement to continuously update technology and prevent cold cases from becoming collective forgetting. From a community perspective, the case is a wake-up call about vigilance in daily life. Rachel simply said no to an advance, but that refusal made her a victim of senseless violence. This underscores the need for societal education on anger management, respecting personal autonomy, and especially raising safety awareness for young women. It also shows that familiar faces in a community don't guarantee absolute safety. Finally, the Rachel Monroe Scholarship at the University of South Florida reminds us that hope can rise from sorrow. Each time a student receives it to pursue marine biology, Rachel's dream lives on. In a nation with hundreds of cold cases awaiting justice, this story sends a powerful message. We must persist, believe, and act to ensure no family is left in darkness too long. If you believe Rachel Monroe's story and her journey to belated justice should reach more people, hit subscribe to join us for the next case. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next video, where we continue to shed light on cold cases hidden in the shadows.